Hi, I'm Corbin. I'm 26 years old and I live in a quiet little town in North Carolina. Nothing too fancy, just a bunch of modest houses lined along tree-covered streets where everyone knows everyone. I work as a mechanic at a local auto shop. It's a simple life, but I like it that way. I grew up here. My parents moved away a few years back, but I stayed. Something about this place always felt like home. You get used to the routine early mornings, fixing up cars, grabbing lunch at the same diner, waving to the same neighbors. I've always had good relationships with the people around me. Folks around here are friendly, helpful, and mind their own business. We look out for one another. It's just the way things are. There's one neighbor I've always noticed a little more than the rest. Her name is Sabine. She's 38, elegant, in that effortless way with soft hazel eyes and dark brown hair that catches the light in the afternoon sun. She lives two houses down with her husband Jackson, who's in the Navy. The guy's barely home though, deployments long trips. He's more of a name on the mailbox than a presence in the house. I'd never thought of crossing any lines. Sabine was married and I had too much respect for that. Sure, I admired her. How could I not? She had a calm grace about her. You'd see her gardening, walking her dog, washing her car. There was something magnetic about her, but I always told myself it was nothing more than a harmless admiration. That afternoon started like any other. I had just gotten home from work and stepped out into my front yard to check the mailbox. The sun was warm, the birds were doing their usual chorus, and there she was. Sabine was in her yard fiddling with the garden hose. It must have come loose from the spigot and she was struggling to get it reattached. I don't know what made me freeze. Maybe it was how the sunlight framed her. Maybe it was the way she casually tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I stood there completely unaware that I was staring. Suddenly she looked up, our eyes locked. My stomach dropped. I had been caught. I opened my mouth to say something, anything. But before I could, she tilted her head, a small amused smile creeping across her lips. Then as casually as if she were commenting on the weather, she whispered across the yard, "You're not even trying to hide it." I blinked, my face flushed. I felt like a teenager caught sneaking glances at his high school crush. I gave a nervous chuckle and shook my head, unsure how to respond. She didn't seem mad or uncomfortable, just amused. Then she turned back to the hose and continued what she was doing like nothing had happened. I stood there for a moment longer, replaying her words in my mind, "You're not even trying to hide it." It echoed in my head all evening. I couldn't shake it off. I wasn't sure if she was teasing me, warning me, or worse yet, testing me. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I told myself it was nothing, just a funny moment, a random interaction. I would move past it, but the truth was deep down I knew something had shifted. A line had been blurred, whether intentionally or not. For the first time I started to wonder, had Sabine noticed me before? The next day started like any other. I pulled into the shop, grabbed my usual coffee from the gas station across the street, and got to work under the hood of a rusty '07 Chevy. But my mind wasn't fully there. Every time I wiped my hands on a rag or reached for a wrench, I kept hearing her voice, "You're not even trying to hide it." It played on repeat. By lunchtime, I was frustrated with myself. I convinced myself that it was just a playful passing comment. Sabine had always been polite, neighborly. There was nothing else to it, or so I thought. That evening, as I pulled into my driveway, I saw her again. She was walking her dog, a small, fluffy mix named Murphy, and our paths crossed near the sidewalk. I gave her a quick wave and she smiled. There was something different in the way she held my gaze, like she was waiting for me to say something. I didn't. I just smiled back and kept walking to my front door. The next day, I found a small container on my porch, homemade banana bread. A note taped to the lid read, "Too much for me and Jackson. Thought you might want some. S." I stared at the note longer than I should have. Jackson wasn't home. Everyone knew he'd shipped out again for 6 months. I brought the bread inside, placed it on the kitchen counter, and stood there for a good 10 minutes. Was this just kindness? That's what I wanted to believe. I texted her a quick thank you and left it at that. But the little things kept happening. I'd come home to find freshly picked flowers sitting by my porch light, or she'd casually stop me while I was mowing the lawn and chat for a few minutes about nothing in particular. The first time I convinced myself it was neighborly friendliness. The third or fourth time, I wasn't so sure. A week later, I was fixing the brakes on an old Ford when I heard someone call my name. I turned to see Sabine standing at the edge of the shop's parking lot. She had a warm smile and waved me over. I walked toward her, wiping grease from my hands with an old rag. "Hey, Corbin," she said, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm running errands in town and figured I'd stop by and say hi." I smiled. "Hi, everything okay?" "Yeah, just bored," she laughed lightly. "I swear when Jackson's away, this house gets too quiet." I nodded, unsure how to respond. "Yeah, I guess that makes sense." For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. The sound of cars passing filled the silence. Then she gave me a soft, knowing look. "Thanks for the banana bread," I said, trying to change the subject. Her eyes brightened. "You liked it?" "Yeah, it was great. I'll make more next time." Her voice lingered on that last word in a way I couldn't quite ignore. After she left, my coworker Travis, who had been standing nearby, gave me a smirk. "Since when do the neighbors bring you homemade bread?" I shrugged, pretending not to know what he meant, but deep down I knew. The following Saturday, I was working on my lawn. The heat was brutal, and sweat ran down my neck as I pushed the mower. Out of nowhere, Sabine appeared with two cold lemonades. "You look like you could use one," she said with that same soft smile. I took it grateful, and we sat on the steps of my porch for a while. We talked about small stuff, whether neighbors, her garden. Then just as she was about to leave, she turned and softly said, "It's nice talking to you. I don't really have anyone else around here these days." That one sentence hit me hard. I knew Jackson was gone more than he was home. I'd heard rumors, whispers about him, things I never repeated. And standing there on my porch, watching her walk back to her house, I realized something had changed. This wasn't just friendly small talk anymore. The barrier I had told myself would always exist between us was quietly, slowly dissolving. I didn't know what it meant yet, and I wasn't ready to act on it. But I also knew I couldn't pretend it wasn't happening. The days turned into weeks, and the unspoken tension between Sabine and me only grew stronger. At first, I tried to keep my distance. I avoided being outside at the same time as her. I busied myself with extra hours at the shop, anything to keep my mind off the situation I didn't want to acknowledge. But every time I pulled into my driveway and caught a glimpse of her watering her flowers or walking Murphy along the sidewalk, my resolve weakened. I told myself I was being paranoid, that she was just a kind neighbor, that I was imagining things. Then came the small gestures that slowly chipped away at that belief. A freshly baked pie left at my door with a simple note. "Too much for me. Thought you might want some," or flowers neatly arranged in a small jar sitting on the edge of my porch. Casual conversations stretched longer than necessary. The occasional light brush of her hand against mine as I passed her something. One evening, about a month after that first unforgettable moment, I was out in my driveway working under the hood of my old pickup when I heard her voice float over the fence. "Hey, stranger." I straightened up, wiping my hands on a rag, and looked over to see Sabine leaning casually against the wooden slats, her soft hazel eyes catching the fading amber light of dusk. She wore a loose gray sweater and faded jeans, her hair in a loose braid that fell over one shoulder. "Hey," I replied, trying to sound casual despite the sudden tightness in my chest. "Didn't expect to see you out." "Couldn't sleep," she said, her lips curled into a small, thoughtful smile. "Too much on my mind." She paused for a beat. "Do you want to come over for some coffee?" I hesitated, every rational part of my brain screaming at me to say no, to keep the line intact. But I also knew that deep down I had been waiting for her to ask. I tossed the rag on my workbench and nodded. "Yeah, sure." Her house smelled faintly of vanilla and cedar. It was neat but lived in. Family photos of beach vacations and framed pictures of Murphy decorated the shelves. She handed me a steaming mug of coffee and sat down across from me on the couch. For a few minutes, we danced around safe topics, the weather town, gossip how bad traffic was getting on Main Street, but there was a tension in the air neither of us could ignore. I stared down at my mug, turning it slowly in my hands. I know you've been avoiding me, Sabine said suddenly. I froze and looked up. I haven't. Yes, you have. Her voice was soft, but there was no accusation in it. I get it, Corbin. I really do. I just... She sighed, her fingers brushing nervously over the rim of her own mug. I don't want things to be awkward between us. I set my cup down and leaned forward slightly. It's not awkward. I just didn't know where we stood. Her gaze softened. Neither do I. There was a long silence between us. The ticking of the old clock in the hallway was the only sound. Then, as if some invisible wall finally crumbled, Sabine began to speak. I feel alone, Corbin. Her voice dropped fragile and quiet. Jackson's never home. And when he is, it's like I'm not even there. He's cold distant. Her fingers tightened slightly around the mug. I know he's cheated. I caught him more than once. The ache in her voice cut me deeper than I expected. I'm sorry, I whispered. She gave a bitter laugh. Don't be. I've stayed because I have nowhere else to go. The house is his. I have no family left, no one to run to. I reached across the space between us and gently rested my hand over hers. She didn't pull away. Her hand trembled beneath mine, but she held on. I'm here, I said simply. Her eyes lifted to meet mine, glassy with emotion. We sat there like that for a long time, not speaking, not needing to. Then she leaned toward me. Slowly, cautiously, she pressed her lips to mine. It was soft and tentative at first, as though she were giving me one last chance to back away. I didn't. My hand moved instinctively to the back of her neck, and the kiss deepened, carrying with it weeks of tension, longing, and unspoken feelings. The world outside ceased to exist. For that night at least, it was just us. The next morning I woke up tangled in guilt and quiet excitement. We both knew the consequences of what we had done. As I sat at the edge of her bed, lacing up my boots, Sabine reached out and touched my arm. We have to be careful, she whispered. No one can know. I nodded solemnly. I know. And so began our secret. We carved out stolen moments in the shadows of our quiet neighborhood. A passing glance across the fence, a text message late at night, quick visits when the neighborhood was empty. Every interaction was a mix of exhilaration and anxiety. Despite the risk, I fell harder for her. It wasn't just physical. We shared long talks about life regrets, fears, and dreams. She told me about her difficult childhood in the foster care system, how she had learned to survive by building walls around her heart. I told her about my parents leaving and the emptiness I felt staying behind. Somewhere between those late-night conversations and stolen kisses, I realized I didn't just want to be her escape. I wanted to be her home. But we both knew reality had a way of catching up. The secret world we had built lasted for months. Each day, the weight of what we were doing grew heavier. Yet I couldn't stop myself. Neither could she. The stolen moments became the only thing I looked forward to. I'd catch glimpses of her from my kitchen window, or I'd hear the soft knock at my door after dark. We knew it couldn't last, but we also didn't know how to let it go. In public, nothing changed. I waved at her from my driveway. She smiled politely from across the street. The rest of the neighborhood remained blissfully unaware, or so I thought. Jackson had been gone for almost 5 months. Everyone said his deployment was supposed to last another 2. That had become our safety net. The calendar itself was our protection. We were careful. We stuck to our routine. We never stayed too long together, never let the boundaries blur in daylight. until the day everything fell apart. It was late afternoon. I had just come home from the shop dirty and tired. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Sabine. "Come over, I made dinner." I hesitated. Something in me felt uneasy, but I ignored it. I walked over the two houses to her place, heart racing like it always did. The house smelled of roasted chicken and fresh herbs. We sat at the table laughing, talking, pretending like we weren't living on borrowed time. At some point, Sabine reached across the table and took my hand. That was when we heard the sound of keys in the front door. My blood ran cold. The door swung open. Jackson stood there, sea bag over his shoulder, still in uniform, face hardened by long months at sea. His eyes scanned the room and locked onto our joined hands in stunned disbelief. The silence was deafening. "What the hell is this?" Jackson's voice was low, deadly calm. I jumped up and stepped back instantly. Sabine's face drained of all color. "Jackson, you weren't supposed to be back yet." She stammered clearly, shaken. His eyes narrowed as he stared at me. "Get out of my house." I stood frozen. Sabine squeezed my arm desperately. "Please," she whispered. Jackson's expression told me this wasn't going to end in conversation. I nodded and stepped toward the door. As I walked past him, I braced for a hit I thought might come, but he simply glared at me with disgust. I walked out into the cold evening air, my hands shaking, my heart racing. I didn't even realize how badly I was trembling until I got inside my own front door and collapsed onto the couch. An hour later, there was a knock. I opened it to find Sabine standing there with her duffel bag and tears streaking down her cheeks. "He kicked me out." Her voice broke. "He threw my things out on the lawn. I have nowhere to go." I pulled her inside and closed the door behind her. We sat silently for a long time. I brewed tea just to have something to do with my hands. When I brought her the cup, she was staring blankly at the floor. "I knew this would happen one day," she said softly. "I just didn't expect it to feel like this." I sat down beside her. "What happens now?" I asked. "I don't know," she whispered. "I can't go back. Even before this, I knew I couldn't. Jackson has been unfaithful for years. I forgave him every time. I told myself I had nowhere else to go. But I stayed because I was scared. Now I'm not scared anymore. I'm just tired." The raw honesty in her voice hit me hard. "I'll help you figure it out," I promised. "We'll figure it out together." She leaned her head against my shoulder. For the first time since I had met her, she looked completely vulnerable. The next few days were a blur. Jackson made no attempt to contact her. Sabine filed for divorce that same week. The papers were served in person at his new apartment across town. There was no yelling, no drama, just the cold finality of an ending that had been coming for years. Word spread fast in our little town. People stared a little longer when they saw us at the grocery store or walking Murphy. Whispers followed us down the street, but no one ever confronted us directly. Sabine kept her head high, even though I knew the judgment cut deep. We talked about everything late into the nights, about what we wanted, about how much we had risked, about what came next. We both knew we couldn't stay here forever. Too many eyes, too many reminders. "I want to leave this place behind," Sabine said one night as we lay in bed, the weight of everything pressing down on us. "I want a fresh start, a place where no one knows me, where I'm not the woman who cheated on the Navy guy." I squeezed her hand. "Then that's what we'll do." We didn't have a plan, but we had each other. For now, that was enough. The decision to leave came faster than either of us expected. One night after another uncomfortable run-in at the grocery store, two women whispering not so quietly behind Sabine's back, we sat in my truck outside her temporary apartment and stared out at the town we both used to love. "I can't keep pretending I don't hear it," Sabine whispered, her voice strained but determined. "Everywhere I go, I feel the looks, the judgment. I stayed for so long because I was afraid to have nothing. Now I realize I already had nothing. I reached over and took her hand. You have me. She smiled small but genuine. I know. That night we agreed to go, no drawn-out goodbyes, no explanations, just us in a fresh start somewhere far away from the whispers. We packed light. Sabine sold what little furniture she had. I turned in my 2 weeks' notice at the shop. My boss gave me a long, understanding look and patted me on the back. Good luck, Corbin. Go build something real. In early spring, we left North Carolina behind. I loaded our few belongings into my old pickup. Murphy nestled between us in the front seat. We drove for hours, the small towns and empty highways stretching out endlessly. Neither of us spoke much. We didn't need to. After a week of driving, we found ourselves in a quiet coastal town in South Carolina, a place where the beaches weren't crowded and no one knew our names, the kind of place where we could disappear and start over. We found a small two-bedroom cottage for rent a few blocks from the shore. The paint was chipped and the porch creaked when you stepped on it, but to us it was perfect. It was ours. The first night in our new house, we sat on the front porch with Murphy at our feet, the warm breeze carrying the scent of salt water. Sabine leaned her head on my shoulder and sighed deeply for what felt like the first time in months. This feels like breathing again, she said softly. I nodded. It feels like home. The next few weeks were simple but good. I got a job at a small repair shop run by a guy named Ellis who didn't ask questions and cared more about work ethic than backstory. Sabine picked up part-time hours at a local bookstore. We fell into a quiet routine of morning walks on the beach, coffee on the porch, and small adventures exploring our new surroundings. Our relationship was no longer something we had to hide. For the first time, I saw Sabine truly relax. The tension in her shoulder, the guarded glances over her back, they slowly melted away. One night as we sat by the water, Sabine opened up about her fears. I was terrified you'd regret this, she admitted. That once the excitement was gone, you'd realize what you gave up. I reached for her hand and squeezed it gently. I didn't lose anything, Sabine. I gained everything I was missing. Her eyes softened. You saved me. I shook my head. No, you saved yourself. I was just lucky enough to be there. Months passed. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. There were bills to pay, long work hours, and the uncertainty that came with starting over. But we faced it all together. One rainy afternoon, I came home to find Sabine standing in the middle of the living room with a big cardboard box. She smiled shyly. I finally got rid of the last of the things from my old life, she said, brushing a stray tear from her cheek. It feels good. I walked over and hugged her tightly. You've come so far. So had I. The small town mechanic, who never thought he'd leave North Carolina, had found a new home, a new life, and a new family in the woman he never expected to fall for. Our journey hadn't been easy. There were regrets, scars, and hard truths we had to face along the way. But standing on the porch of our creaky little cottage, Sabine in my arms, Murphy chasing seagulls in the distance, I realized I wouldn't change a single thing. You know, I said, breaking the comfortable silence, we should find this place, make it really ours. Sabine laughed, her voice light and full of hope. Yeah, let's do that. As the sun set over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the waves, we stood there together, ready to build a life that finally belonged to us. The story of Corbin and Sabine delivers a heart-wrenching lesson about the courage it takes to follow your heart, even when it leads you into uncharted and morally complex territory. Their journey from stolen glances to a secret love and ultimately to a new life together teaches us that true connection often comes at a cost requiring sacrifice, vulnerability, and the strength to face judgment. Corbin's evolution from a cautious neighbor to a partner willing to uproot his life for Sabine shows that love can push us to redefine our boundaries and confront uncomfortable truths. This narrative reminds us to listen to our deepest desires, but also to weigh the consequences of our choices as they ripple through the lives of others. Sabine's decision to leave a hollow marriage and embrace a fresh start underscores the power of reclaiming one's worth, no matter how daunting the path. Their story is an emotional call to cherish authentic relationships and to find peace in building a life that feels true, even if it means leaving behind the familiar. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced a choice between following your heart and staying safe? Your stories inspire and connect us all. If this tale moved you, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell to join our community of heartfelt storytelling. Let's keep exploring life's deepest lessons together.